mean, we're not even open yet, but I've seen a lot of changes already, which is for me exciting, inspiring on this end with the clinic, but also exciting knowing that from an alloy standpoint, like we're just getting started. Like it's going to just continue to evolve, continue to improve. And I just think the sky's the limit.
Hey guys, welcome. I want to introduce someone that's become a friend, early on, but a really smart guy. He's got a ton of stuff going on. He's a consummate entrepreneur. Of course, selfishly, I'm super excited that he's an alloy franchisee. He is a chiropractor, a clinician. He owns a sports medicine, I guess, for lack of better terms, very progressive clinic. We're going to get to hear a lot about that and maybe why, having a fitness component bolted on to your clinic, your clinical business is a really good idea. Welcome, Dr. David Jolson.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, man. Look, I know you're a busy man, so I really do appreciate your time, but tell our audience a little bit about your background. I mean, I know, all the way back from your dad, being in the medical field as well, but how did you get interested in a chiropractic? Tell us a little bit about, that thought process. You have a really interesting clinic. I mean, it's a different spin on it. It's very performance based, very, I would say, progressive, high tech, maybe even is a good word. But, tell us about your background and how you got into what it is that was your original business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So by trade, I'm a sports med based chiropractor, just focus on the active population, focus on athletes, but really just general population as well, just helping people move better, decrease pain, improve performance. And so I try to utilize lots of tools. So I combine chiropractic care with physical therapy, soft tissue muscle work, sports performance principles to really just, use the right tool for the job. And so, I've always been just an active person. I played small ball college basketball, Kenyon College in Ohio. Grew up in what I would say is like a helping culture. My dad's an orthopedic surgeon. My grandfather's orthopedic surgeon. So always just had a lot of respect for medicine and what they did. So that was always an interest of mine. I never necessarily wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, but I was always, in college, I was always a guy there early doing mobility exercises and stretching, and really just was never exposed to chiropractic. Was more thinking physical therapy, maybe going to med school, kind of figuring it out, and ended up meeting a chiropractor post-undergrad who basically told me that his license gives them the ability to use whatever tool he wants to help people. And I mean, once I heard that, I was like, man, that is it. And from there, what it really went to is me trying to be able to help someone from pain to performance. So trying to find someone at their, worst, some of their worst challenges where they got debilitating low back pain, radiation down to their leg, and be able to take them from there through an education process to being pain-free and then getting them over to the performance side of things. So it's been a fun road. We started Upstate Spine Sport here, Greenville, South Carolina. We've got chiropractors, physical therapy, acupuncture, massage therapy. I've got one of my little niches is golf. So I work on the tour, on the PGA Tour. And so I've got a golf simulator and a Proteus motion machine. And so just a lot of different tool, body track, MAD and KVS. And so, like you said, I love the nerdy tech. I love progressing people, into the performance realm. And I think the biggest thing is all of our clinicians, we call them hybrid clinicians. So all of our massage therapists, they're personal trainers. I don't stay in my lane, if you will, just being a chiropractor. Our acupuncturists have big nutrition and other interests as well. And I think that's kind of just how our world's going, with pain and performance. There's a lot of overlap. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And what a cool approach. That was a great way to describe it, because I was trying to describe your clinic to someone else. I'm like, it's really just like a human performance clinic, with a very like a high tech and more clinical approach. We used to have a physical therapist in our facility. We've actually had one, up until a few years ago for the entire existence, our 31 years in business. He moved a couple doors down and opened his own. It sounds very familiar to sort of what he's trying to do. Cash-based business. He's trying to do more performance-based. And I think you're right. Like the trends are really showing certainly for people in a performance-based setting, that's where you're going, right? You have to have lots of tools in your toolbox. Technology obviously is a huge asset in that case. And the ones like people like yourself that are embracing that early on are doing really well. I mean, it's very well received. Now, that's perfect segue to my next question because it tends to run right up against what I would say what we do at Alloy, right? So, what was your early thought process in bolting on? I mean, we'll talk about Alloy in a minute, but just a fitness concept in general. Like, what was your thought process and how did you get to the point where you're like, you know what? Like, we get people back to performance, but it would be nice to have this ongoing, approach. What was your thought process around that?
The biggest challenge in musculoskeletal medicine is, well, here's a good question for you, Rick. So, like, what's the number one cause of low back pain?
Yeah,
What do you think?
sitting-centric society, inactivity, like, right?
Yeah, you and that's what most people say, and you're not wrong, but like based on literature, it's previous low back pain. Stupid, right? Like it's
right. Best
but
predictor
like
is previous pain, right?
previous pain, right? For any musculoskeletal issue. So just recurrence rates in this country are just like they're just through the roof. So as much as like my deepest intentions as a clinician are to guide people to a pain-free life, right? But recurrence rates are still incredibly high. Like and so for me, we use manual work to speed the process up, but we're teaching them how to move better, how to get strong in the right place, how to lengthen the right tissue. And then once they're in a pain-free state, it's always trying to guide them to the right performance option. I would always gravitate. We've got a lot of great little small, like personal, usually just one-on-one personal trainers in town who I've developed great relationships with. I've got a lot of respect for them. They are, one, they're very busy, and then two, they can be quite expensive. So it wouldn't be a fit for everyone. But if I had my perfect choice, it would always be sending them to someone that I could say, hey, previous cervical radiculopathy, had a shoulder involvement, scapular dyskinesis, a little bit of weakness through the shoulder blade. I think their core needs some work, but assess and hopefully keep them out of my clinic, And then, but if something pops up, like I want to be a resource to be able to get them back to you because that's where they're really going to, be able to reach the goals that they really want to. So the performance side was always on my radar, in getting people to that point. It was just trying to figure out what's the best way to do so. I mean, I just got frustrated with some of the big class-based, where it's the avatar, if you will, is a 25-year-old female, and I'm sitting in front of a 44-year-old, hypermobile female who just needs like resistance training and doesn't need to row every day or doesn't need to do yoga every day, and trying to guide them to the right place. I mean, that's like what I feel is my responsibility. And that's kind of where this all came from, where I was like, I need to, for our community here in Greenville, like I need to find a better solution.
Yeah, love it. And of course, selfishly, what was it about Alloy that matched up well? Was it programming? I mean, I know, like when I first talked to you, we use some of the same tools, right? Like we would sort of pick up where you may leave off, right? It's like, all right, you're functional, but these are the things you're going to need to do. But is there going to be accountability that long term? That's not the business model of the clinic, right? It's to get them from pain to pain free to functional and performance, related. But then after that, it's like you said, there's so many reoccurrences. So what was it about Alloy that intrigued you? I can remember some of our early conversations, but I think the audience would find that interesting.
The first it was almost a lot of my ideas that I didn't have tangibly like aggregated, put together. Like you described them perfectly. The first, I was like, that is what we need in this community. And the other thing is, I started Upstate Spine Sport, and I got two little kids and a wife, and I didn't want to try to start something on my own and lose my wife in the process. That was
that was a good idea.
That was a big part of it. But I mean, I'm a TPI, FRC, DNS, PRI, like any 3-letter acronym you can think of, right? But like I always the FMS, and just like from a foundational assessment standpoint, I thought that would connect well to how we're assessing people, and so I didn't think it would be a foreign way for someone to come into the new system. I thought from the biggest foundation around here in the clinic is communication, and that seemed to be a big core value of Alloy as well. So that kind of resonated with me. And then just the data, right? The in-body, the audits, the coming back with accountability sessions, the starting point session, the community that you can create in the setting where in my world, or in my opinion, it's almost like you're taking some of the best things from class and the best things from personal training. So you still get community, but you are able to get like very specific individualized attention. It seemed like something for me personally. I was like, oh man, I would love to do that. I've done one-on-one personal training. I like it. It's fine, but I'm not a perfect movement, athlete, if you will. Like I need a little guidance without a doubt, but I don't need someone to like hold my water bottle and like be on their phone. I'd rather have a little, hey, yeah, form looks good. You're a little anterior tilted pelvis, whatever it might be. And then move to the next, or give me a hard time, and me be able to watch someone next to me who's trying to lose 40 pounds. To me, that seemed like, I was like, man, that sounds fun. Like it sounds exciting. So there's a lot of things just aligned where it was the programming was very, things that I was aware of, full body workouts, just your standard, or like your just efficient, well-researched types of movements. It was the communication, it was the excitement, the community, the environment that you can foster. So there's a lot of things that made sense from an alloy standpoint, and that bridging the gap from upstate spine sport.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think some of my proudest moments are when someone that we're working with, partnered with, like you, can articulate what we think we do, maybe even better than I do, because I have too much knowledge, right? So you succinctly say, here's why I think it's great. One-on-one training, it's kind of expensive. It's a little sleepy, right? Class-based can't accommodate injuries and all the things that are going to be important to you, especially to patients that are coming out of, some type of pain. But yeah, man, I love it. And that's where we see it as well. So I've always loved the idea of marrying it up to a clinic, and like, listen, life happens. So it's not like if your fitness is up and you go skiing in Aspen and tear your ACL, it's like, okay, you're back to performance. But to have those two things so that people can sort of move from one phase to the other because life happens, I think it's brilliant. I mean, look, if I could put both of these together in a business model, I would probably do it. I think it's probably too complicated, right, to scale. So I love the fact that, like, all right, you know the clinic side, let us bolt this fitness thing on. To your point, each business is unique and there's a learning curve for each, right? And so for you to stay married and get the bandwidth of a franchise, I think there was a smart move. If I was going to do a clinic, I'd probably go to you and be like, hey, can you just do this clinic for me? I'll build it out and you do it. But I love the marriage. And I think the programming is something that we don't get to talk a lot about, because I think when people come in, they're more on the investor side. So I always relish the opportunity to speak to someone who really knows, and knows even more than I do, certainly, about human movement and programming, and be able to recognize the tools, right? And say, okay, you nailed it, right? Can we do these things with integrity? Like, we use similar tools, that you use, and with similar influences as well. We were talking about your Proteus machine that you purchased, which is this super high tech machine that measures, power output in these different movement patterns, which is really applicable then to what someone's like, certainly if they're going to golf, right? And we both have, people in the industry that we know that use them, whether it be for pro baseball or whatever. And that's where the motivation or the impetus for us, that's where our programming comes from. So it allows us to, at least at the base level, speak the same language as you. It's just fun to be able to articulate that, and for you to recognize it as someone with your background to say, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, we would use that in a fitness setting as well. So anyway, super cool. And I think it's a smart move to go the franchise route. And I know that sounds self-serving, but man, it's just a massive shortcut, as you've seen. One of the things that you said, and it just popped into my mind as I'm thinking this out loud, because you're a consummate entrepreneur, and that can sometimes be a problem for franchising, because it's like you're like used to doing your own thing. You're very creative, right? So it takes a little bit of maturity to buy a business in a box. And then it's really important to us that people follow process, right? They're not like, hey, how about this? How about that? And I think you've done a good job of marrying the two, because I think there's a lot we can learn from you and from franchisees, while also staying within the guardrails, right, of the system. So when it comes to franchising, there's certain mechanisms and business functions. You had said at one point that, like, hey, I'm really enjoying like the education of the franchise. I think it's going to help me with my clinical business, right? And you're already a great business owner, but you're like, hey, there's a few little nuggets in here that I can probably pull over, right? And help me with my clinical business. Can you speak to that at all? Yeah, am I remembering that correctly? First of all,
No, you are. I think chiropractors, physical therapy, well, probably more chiropractors in general. We're so dominated by private practice, right? We're not for them. We're integrating into some more bigger systems, healthcare, that hospitals, that sort of thing, VAs, which is great. But being private practice in some ways was one of the reasons that I was attracted to the field, just being able to have that freedom, and really you're creating your own value, right? Like if someone doesn't like what you're doing, like they're going to go somewhere else. Like we don't have the marketing from an insurance company, at least the way we operate. And so there was, from a upstate spine sports standpoint, I mean, it's kind of just been I'm making it up as I go, right? Learning, I'm being a little facetious, but like learning as I go. And like it's a very humbling process, and it's fun. Like, it's like you said, like I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. But it was one, as I got into this, I think, to be fair, in the very beginning, I probably had a little trouble with not with letting go of the freedom and the creativity that comes with being like an entrepreneur, just starting something on your own. But the more I kind of dug into Alloy's systems and the way they were doing things, it kind of took a step back. It was really quickly evident that you guys had, 30 years of experience, right? Like it was, and there was a lot that I could take away from the systems, the processes that were, and a lot of them were little things that I've been implementing here in the clinic for the last 6 months to a year, so it's been like a really, not an expected gift from this whole process, but it really has been. Like, I think I've become a better leader here in the clinic because of going through this process. Which has been fun for me, because it's almost, I've never had like checks and balances, if you will, to what I do. I kind of just go forward. My wife's a great sounding board. We started the clinic together. She's an acupuncturist, but even still, like we still didn't have anyone with experience. A lot in my field, there's not great coaches out there who aren't pushing the dependency model, where it's just like 3 times a week for the rest of your life. So like my model is just different. So anyway, being able to take Alloy's systems and implement them, like an easy example, and I've really loved what you guys are doing with the EOS, is one part of that system is in our level 10 meetings is props. And so I've integrated portions of the level 10 meeting into the clinic, and over time we'll integrate it completely, but not trying to kind of shock the whole system right away. But first thing was props. And I probably like bastardized it a little bit, like when I went through, for sure, like without a doubt, like Gino Wickman would be frowning on me probably, but like, so I just said like, hey, I want to start something new. It's props. Basically, if anyone has anything they've really admired or respected, another clinician or someone's done something well, and like, it was unbelievable. I mean, there's people like in tears, because
wow.
there's just, when you're in the clinical setting, you have a massage therapist, they're working. Like, I'm busy, like I'm patient, see a patient, get them, whatever, back and forth. Like, there's not a lot of like downtime where we're just like chilling, hanging out. So there was so many like good feedback of specific interactions about something that our management team had done. I mean, like people were literally like tearing up. It was amazing.
That's awesome,
right?
Man. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, it was very cool. And so that was just a light bulb for me. I'm like, man, like simple things like that I've learned through this system. And the cool thing, one other thing that I think the, like, we call, the growth mindset, like very important to me, very important to our clinicians. That was something that was really evident right away when I had the first conversation with you. It's just that realistic, like, look, like we're going to have growing pains, like we're kind of just not just getting going, but from the licensing and franchising to it's new. And so I think understanding as a franchisee in this role, that there's there's things that you guys are still working on, but you're working hard on them. And I've seen improvement, even in the short time, and we're not even open yet, but I've seen a lot of changes already, which is for me exciting, inspiring on this end with the clinic, but also exciting knowing that from an Alloy standpoint, like we're just getting started, like it's going to just continue to evolve, continue to improve. And I just think the sky's the limit.
I appreciate that. And for anybody listening, we didn't mention this, but Dr. Jolson purchased 3 locations. So he's got his clinic as sort of this hub, but he's actually purchased 3 locations, which is basically the areas of Greenville, right? All of the areas of Greenville that are really viable for an Alloy, which is a relatively small, friggin' awesome place to live, by the way, great market, but are relatively small. And, that kind of, well, I want to ask you one more thing on that before we get to like how things are going thus far, even though you're in early innings. So, I often describe business, or I've heard it described, I should say, because I'm sure I've heard it somewhere else as everything else in my life. But that entrepreneurship is a self-help journey disguised as a business. So, here you are, the consummate technician, right? And that's where that's where you start. It's like, I want to help people, I want to change these lives. Then you're opening a clinic, right? Okay, that's different. Now you've got people in your charge that are working for you, and like you said, you're having team meetings, and you're doing things that aren't technical, they are leadership based. You have to then become a different person. Then you decide to take on this construction project and you build a strip shopping center, but it's a different concept, right? It's all wellness related. And for anybody that is listening to this, go to Alloy Upstate, which is the first location, and you can see some renderings. I think the last post that Dr. Jolson made, or I have to call you David, I guess. You're probably like, don't call me that.
Yeah, that's my dad.
That's right.
My grandma,
David made about his facility. The place is unbelievable. And, you mentioned that you just had a group in town, a construction management group, just to celebrate and look at this new concept. It's sort of front edge. But and then you think about that, and then you got 3 Alloy locations. You and I have talked about more of those, maybe more clinics for you. It's like, you're going to have to be a different person, 5 years from now than you are right now to make that happen, because you can't be a technician that just, treats patients. You certainly need to know that that's where you started, and that's where that's your why. You're going to need to be a different person. So what are your thoughts on how you're going to manage that? I think it's already happened a little bit. You're saying, hey, like, I've learned this, and I'm looking at things this way. I think, that's going to have to continue, right? Because you're a really sharp guy. I think same thing for you. The sky's the limit. Is it a mindset that you're going to stay in, or how do you envision yourself going through that journey over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
That's a good question. My wife will tell you I'm like almost a planner to a fault. I think the foundation is just having good sounding boards, right? And being intentional about, a 1, 3, 5, 10 years. I think the rocks with the EOS, just looking quarterly. And ultimately it's just about the people, right? Like about the people in your world, the 5 closest people to you. But I've heard you, I've heard you say that quote before. It really is a journey. I'm different. I'm so different today than I was 10 years ago. I would expect the same thing, and it for me, it's in so many different, say I would expect the same thing in 10 years. For me, it's in so many different areas of my life. Like clinically, if I'm doing the same thing that I'm doing now in 5 years, like I'm just not challenging myself enough. I think it's really easy to get, especially when you're helping people, like it's very easy to get comfortable with that and stop some of the growth that I think is imperative if you want to stay on the front cutting edge of a profession. I think the same thing will be with Alloy, how we're creating structure, how we're creating opportunities for trainers, for our community. And then I think the same thing goes for my overall growth personally. I think just listening to podcasts, reading, it's finding things that really get you. I have a business coach, her name's Tabby Cooper. She does a great job with me. She's just like a sounding board with help kind of like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, there's just like so much floating up in brain is just like getting it out and getting it streamlined, trying to simplify it. Like, it's funny when you ask me, like, tell me about yourself. Like, I'm like at the point, I'm like, shit, I don't know where to start now. Like there's
how
like,
long do we have?
yeah,
Right.
there's just so many different pieces, which is great, but it's funny. It's like, it still seems simple in my head. Right. Like, but I think that's come from just being thoughtful about planning for the future, about having resources that I can communicate and talk to. I think that's been the foundation. I don't even know if I answered your question on that one. I mean,
No,
that,
I hear
yeah,
you. That's an entrepreneurial answer if I've ever heard one. It's like
right. Yeah. Yeah.
all of the place.
I don't, it's
I'm
like,
the
I don't
same
know.
way.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the
Yeah.
secret? How are you going to keep growing? I think it's a mindset ultimately, right? You have to be wired for it. And you have to also be very self-aware, right? Humble, I guess would be another word for that, where you're like, look, man, I know that I'm going to need to grow personally. Like, your vision has to be big enough. You mentioned people. I think that's the key, right? It's like who you surround yourself with. If you want to just use like the EOS frameworks, I know you've referenced that a couple of times. If you're the visionary, right, and that's clearly you, you've got really big ideas, and sort of the definition of that person's like 20 ideas a day, and da 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 da. Well, then you've got to have an integrator, right? And you're going to have somebody who can put things into play and run the day to day business and put these ideas into and bring them to reality and operationalize them. And I mean, from where I sit, you'd probably agree, that's actually the harder part. It's easier to come up with 20 ideas if you're wired that way. But I think it's just a mindset, and you definitely have it. I mean, the fact that you're like, hey, you were already running a very successful clinic, amazing reputation in your community, and then you're like, hey, I've learned a lot from this, a little bit of exposure to this structured business of alloy, and I can, even though I'm an entrepreneur, I can bring parts and pieces of that over to this business, right? So that alone is like a student mindset, which I think, as long as you stay in that headspace, I think you'll be great. To your point, I've seen people in your position in clinics where, maybe the prescription is the 3 day a week, right? Come here 3 days a week forever. They kind of build up and then they just sit. And there's maybe nothing wrong with that, but it makes it hard then to be in the real estate business, in the fitness business, a clinician, like all the things that you need to be for your bigger vision, right? Which, by the way, the bigger your vision gets, you're going to be able to attract people that also have a big vision, and yours is so big, theirs can fit within yours. And that allows you to attract dynamic, great talent, right? Whereas if you were, not that there's anything wrong with it, but if you were like, hey, I'm going to be the doctor in this clinic, I'm going to have maybe a part-timer help me out, and I'm just going to treat patients, 3 or 4 days a week. And this is what I'm going to do. That's okay. It's just a different path. And you're not wired that way. You've got an entrepreneurial brain, not a technician's brain, even though you're a great technician. So yeah, I think it was a great answer. And listen, I'm actually trying to explain your answer as complicated as you gave it to me. So here's two entrepreneurs trying to have a succinct conversation.
Yeah. Like, I think,
apologies to the audience.
yeah, no, but you did a nice job. And like, hearing you talk it through, like, it's a core value that we both share with Alloy, and what we've had at our clinic before we even met, which is ours is simplicity. You guys have the KISS principle. We have simplicity. I've got the quote, one of my favorite quotes in our team room: simplicity is ultimate sophistication. Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, it's just
about to say Da Vinci. Yep.
That's right. Yep. So, the more that we can like keep things simple, stick to our values, treat people the way that they need to be treated. I mean, Greenville, I'm just lucky to be here. Like, it's a unique town where it's growing like crazy, but the word of mouth is still just so strong. So it's important how you treat people everywhere. But here, it is the foundation. And so building our community by keeping things simple, getting people to the right place. If it's in our system, great. If it's someone who loves the gym that they go to, they might need to go to a yoga class, and we've got great yoga studios in town. So it's just, we see ourselves as guides, and we want to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Alloy is going to be an incredible resource for us, but still the foundation is understanding their biomechanics, teaching them, guiding them to where they need to be. My oldest son, he's almost 5. He's starting to ask me, like, what do you do? That same question, like, and I tell him I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. Like, I teach people how to move better. I teach them how to get stronger and how to get out of pain, and he kind of gets that. Right.
Right.
So I think that's the foundation, is trying to keep it simple that I could explain it to my 5-year-old and he'll
Love it.
understand it.
Absolutely love it. And by the way, that's good for marketing and everything else, right? If your 5-year-old
Hmm.
can understand what you do and you can explain it to him, take that to the general public, and you've done an amazing job of that. So once again, dude, perfect alignment, like great partner. So one of the huge advantages that you have, and we're already seeing this come to fruition because you're what, 3 or 4 weeks into your pre-sale, is that right?
Yep, 3.5.
So 3.5 weeks into pre-sale, you've got this. Here's what you have in spades, and I want to give you props here. Trust, right? You guys do what you say. You're the utmost integrity, and trust is it's a currency these days. It's in short supply. There's something called the Edelman barometer, which measures 4 categories in the world of trust. It's like government, private business, NGOs, which is like Red Cross, that type of thing, and then media. None of them make it into the quadrant that says they're competent and they're trustworthy, right? None of those. Some are like, okay, private business or big business, definitely competent, trustworthy, maybe not so much, right? The media and the government, probably neither. NGOs, trustworthy, but not that competent. They're probably not run that well. So it's hard to make it into that quadrant of both competent and trustworthy, but you've done that. And if you can do that, you're working with a real currency. So you come to market with this reputation. You've built essentially a currency in your market, which is trust, because you do what you say what you do. You guys are good at it. You meet your promises. You treat your patients to the lens that you just said. You do what's best for each individual that's in front of you. Can't do anything better than that, right? How has that crossed over thus far in your pre-sales? Just talk about it a little bit. And I just want people to hear this, but I also want them to understand, like, this is a an outlier. This is a guy who's worked his ass off to build a great business and reputation in a market. But I think if you're a clinician and you're hearing this and you're like, man, this guy's really sharp. I want to do what he's done. I want to bolt a fitness concept on. This could be one of the advantage. So talk about how you've been able to parlay this trust and this client base into the early innings of an alloy pre-sale.
So the foundation, like you said, is trust. I tell all my patients, I always tell them, thank you for the trust. Like, I really genuinely appreciate that they, put their trust of their health, their wellness, with our team. And so the foundation with a lot of our patients, especially ones who we let them run wild, right? They get out of pain. Hey, go do your thing. I'd recommend these few things. Make sure you still are auditing your range of motion. Make sure you're still doing some of the low level stability work that we've done. But still recurrence rates are high. They might come in and need a little tune up, or we might have to work a different area that could be playing a role in this. And so over time, I mean, because we've had a little bit longer of a lead up to with us building our property, to our location being ready to go, I've been talking to people about alloy for a long time, and those that I've felt ethically that would be a good fit, that resistance training is great. I've educated them on what it is and the value that I think it could provide. So when we started our pre-sale, I mean, we had a list of, I mean, to be blunt, like over 250 people who had expressed some interest. Now there was some on there who we knew were going to be a great fit. And so the other big part, which I haven't mentioned, is if I'm as far as having an implementer, if you will, or in the EOS system, Annie, our director of training, we've worked together for 3 years. We have, again, great trust. So having her has been massive, but being able to then get the list to her and her go out and talk to them. And it's just like an easy conversation, right? And it's not pushy. It's just, I haven't lost a minute of sleep over it. I never will, because what we're doing is just it's so good for these people. Like, it's going to be the impact that we are going to make from a pain to performance is so massive. It's like why you do what you do, right? Like
Exactly.
the stories that are going to come out of this, debilitating pain to like losing weight, building skeletal muscle mass. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, it's so easy to get excited about. So, I mean, we're 3.5 weeks in and we have 90 plus secured members. I mean, we're
how much marketing spend for that, David?
And I'm $0. I mean,
look, man, anybody listening to this that's done a pre-sale is just like, you son of a gun. Like, they would love to be in your spot, but I mean, hey, you paid your dues. You built a currency in your market, and now you're cashing it in, so to speak, right? taking advantage of it in the best of ways and putting people into another opportunity that'll be really good for them. But yeah, I think it's been awesome to see. It's like zero ad spend, and our budget's typically 30 to 40,000. I remember when we originally talked and you were like, hey man, like if I can just sell this thing full without a marketing spend, that's cool, right? I don't have to spend. And I'm like, no, it's more about getting you up to speed. So we're setting an expectation. You don't have to spend it. But I was also kind of like, yeah, okay, well, we'll see. That all sounds great, but proof's in the pudding. And like 2 weeks in, they're like, I think we're at like 75 people, which we require for you to open. I'm like, in 2 weeks with zero marketing spend. So the fact that you guys are sniffing 100 in 3.5 weeks, because pre-sale is typically 12 weeks. So we're expecting big things out of you guys. And you're right, man. Annie is your director of training. Well, obviously, we met her when she came out. Love her. She's great. So not surprising that good people hire great people, right? And so, like, props to you and to her. But yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's a huge advantage. And I know that you've got 3, right? So you'll be doing 2 and 3, and this will also make everyone, like you a little bit less when you say, well, if we have extra people that we can't put in the first location, we'll just roll them over to the second location. And they're like, what a great problem to have. But again, testament to you and also testament to what a fitness model bolted on. If you're a good business owner and you've run a good, clinic or good practice up to this point, could be really powerful, right? You built that trust already. So I think it's awesome. Anything else that you see there that we haven't mentioned on how about this? What about a technique for anyone listening that is a clinician? Is there a certain magic or conversation or a way that you found to get people from the clinic, to the fitness? Because I think that's unique to you, and you're kind of the first Alloy franchisee to do it. So is there anything that you think you could share that has been successful for you?
Yeah. So a lot of the foundation of how I approach everything clinically is based on range of motion. So ultimately, to dumb down chiropractic, like the adjustment, like I don't oversell it as alignment or any of that kind of, in my opinion, kind of BS. Like, to me, it improves range of motion. It's a great tool. It's temporary, but it's a great way to stimulate the system, get someone moving better. And then we use the range of motion as an audit. So if someone has neck pain, what I'll usually recommend, like as I'm dismissing them from care, if you will, is to audit their range of motion, habit stack it, right? Like I'm a big James Clear guy, like habit stack it. You drink coffee, you check your range of motion. That's your first baseline. You audit. Okay. If you're blocked at all, you attack it. Okay. You open up your range of motion. That's going to help get you a little bit out in front of it. If your range of motion is clear, you need to get stronger within your entirety of your range of motion. Right. And so depending on the client, the patient, I mean, some might be a great fit, like we said, for Alloy, some might not. In my biased opinion, I think most of them are anyone above the age of 30 probably could use some form of resistance training mixed with zone 2 training or, whatever they playing basketball, whatever they enjoy doing. So really it's just talking to them that, hey, look, explaining a little bit about the Alloy system, why I think that they could be a good fit, seeing if they're interested, and then kind of putting the ball into Annie's court for her to kind of go a little bit into some more details. I mean, like we talked about, the trust is there. So between me and that patient. So a lot of the times at that point where they know ethically, we've talked about how I don't want them coming to see me 2 times a week for the rest of their life. Maybe they've come from a chiro, that's what they were doing, and so it makes it, they just kind of get it at that point. They're like, okay, I'm out of pain. I'm checking it. When my range of motion is limited, I'm doing my movement. My pain's going away. Like, I can handle this. Like, you're giving them accountability and self-efficacy. And then the step beyond that is like, all right, you've got out of pain. Now let's get further away from pain. And the way to do that is through creating better movement patterns, getting stronger within that range of motion. So it's just logical. It's just movement. It just makes sense.
I bet that conversation is so casual for you because you so believe in it that you're just like, hey, why would you not do this? Right. Well, it's interesting because I know that, you guys are in pre-sale. You're certainly atypical because you're not getting a lot of digital leads. It's just like, hey, you're just saying, hey, here's Annie, and do what I told you to do because I'm your doctor. And I think it's best for you. And you mean it. Most powerful referral ever to yourself. Right.
I always joke that my model with evidence. So this is to my evidence-based chiropractors. So evidence informed, whatever you want to call it. But our challenge is, like, I'm joking, but we have a bad business model, right? Like, we don't create dependency. We don't create recurring people coming in 3 times a week for the rest of your life. Probably a better business model than me seeing someone 6 to 10 times for a low back issue and then getting them back out in the world. So from a business standpoint, this allows the life of my new patient to be a little bit more, right? Where I can then transition them into a performance option that, like, A, it's creating recurring value. B, it is the best thing for that human being, right? Like it is. So like not only are we helping people with ethical, but from a financial standpoint, like in our model where in physical therapy or more movement-based chiropractic, like it's just a logical outstretch to what we're already doing. And then we're going to, I mean, Dr. Gary, who's our other chiropractor here, she's top notch. Our a couple of our acupuncturists, I mean, we'll go and we will go to these allo locations and provide value as far as doing core workshop classes and doing movement screens. And so, we're going to take some of the more intricate principles, like we love FRC and pale rails and cars and doing car workshops. We're doing other intricate things on top of the system that's only going to bulletproof, keep people there because that's where we want them getting stronger, but be the resource that if they are having trouble, they can come back into the clinic. I had this conversation with the potential assistant director of training yesterday. I said, I told him, like the biggest challenge in medicine and fitness is ego, right? Like everyone has entirely too much ego. Like I never want someone struggling over there, their low back starts to flare up, for you to feel like it is going to be like you've done something wrong if they need to see me. Right. Like we all as human beings and clinicians, like we all want to help. And like sometimes that is the problem, right? Like we keep people for too long or we don't get them to the right provider. I mean, the beautiful thing about this system that we're creating with the clinic, with Alloy, is like with the communications, right? Like there's no ego, like they're just in the right place at the right time. And if it's not in our system, that's great too, because it's for our community. So there's just so much from a synergy standpoint between Alloy personal training and a physical therapist or evidence informed chiropractor, that blend to me is the best thing you could do for your community. And from a financial standpoint, I think it's one that will be more sustainable than some of our practice models.
Yeah, I love it. We just did a podcast on Good to Great, which is amazing business book, but there's something in there called the hedgehog concept. And it's like trying to decide what you're the best in the world at. And when we really like, what's the financial measure of all the things that you do that gives you the best? Like, how do you drill down to the one thing? Like in a hedgehog, the whole idea is that hedgehog only has one defense system. It rolls in a ball with all these spikes on it, and I think they parallel it with like the fox, right? And the fox has all these ideas and all these things they want to do. And if you're a company and you're trying to be the best at like 1,000,001 things, that can be really difficult. But in the hedgehog concept, it's like, this is what we do, the best. And it marries up perfectly, again, to what you guys do. So it's hard to keep it simple with that entrepreneurial brain, but yeah, man, you got it figured out. I don't even know where to go with this conversation because I get so excited. We could probably go down the rabbit hole of programming and how that lines up, but like we'll have to do a follow-up podcast. But last question for you. So what's the future look like? Like I know this is a sort of a stereotypical question, but for a guy like you, I think it's a great question. So let's just say 5 years from now, where's David Jolson with Alloy, his clinic, real estate? What do you have in mind for yourself, David?
I think like an underlying theme always, like spine pain's a $600 billion industry. So, doing my best to simplify that and chip away at it and get people to the right place. That's the underlying foundation, improve that. From a clinical standpoint, I mean, so with my rotational athlete populations, that's if I'm sitting on the couch, I'm probably reading, about golf or about baseball or throwers or something. Like that's just what gets me fired up. So over time, my goal is to continue for that to be my predominant patient population, where I'm right now. I do about anywhere between 25 and 30 hours in the clinic seeing patients. And so I'll decrease that a bit, probably to around 20 is the goal, 20 to 22. And then be able to serve and go a little bit more in depth with some of my pro golfers and amateur golfers, or guys trying to make a lot of high school golfers, baseball players, throwers, really just kind of dive into like what really gets me excited. That's one part of everything. The growth with Alloy, right? Creating just really good structure within Alloy is going to be foundational. Finding and getting people who align with our core values of Alloy, finding those kinds of people who it really resonates with them. I think the beauty of having 3 locations and potentially more is that there's mobility within it. It's incredibly unique in fitness as far as what we can pay people, what we can provide for them. I think for me, because it's not my primary source of income, like it's more to me like community, that I'm not trying to milk every single dollar out of it. Like I'm going to pay these people well. I'm going to like them being excited about their position is so foundational for me. So growing Alloy, creating sustainability, growth there. Hopefully we're doing that in 5 years. The other thing is just getting more into, I want to write, and I want to teach, so those are the other two things that's on my 5 years start to die. I've kind of been trying to build everything first, and have that foundation, probably similar in some ways to you with when you first started, and then start to dive into teaching other people what I've learned, my challenges that I've faced. And like I said, that $600 billion industry, like that's the metric, right? It is getting people away, decreasing that number, which to me, a lot of that is surgical costs, improving non-surgical care, leading them to the right fitness option, and then teaching other people how they can do that in their own communities, as well as also some of the clinical stuff. I'd like to dive a little deeper into that. But, my wife would tell you like you hear me. I mean, some of it. Yeah,
I love it, man. I love it.
Who knows? And then being with my family,
Right.
man. I mean, that's my foundation. Like is just being able to create freedom for me, for them, and spend time with my boys. Maybe coach a little bit as they get a little bit older, and things like that.
Yep. And as you know, the more you upskill yourself as an entrepreneur, you're going to have systems in place that are going to get like what feels like to an entrepreneur, this sort of like straight jacket, right? Which is systems. That's actually freedom. And I can already tell you're there, right? It's like, hey, the more systems I put in place, the more the business is going to run itself based on these accountability checklists and guardrails that I've put up, so that I can then have more freedom to pursue what I actually love, which is why I got in the business. I can still be a clinician. I can work with these athletes that I have a passion for, have time to coach my kids ball. The only way you can do that is if you put systems in place, and you're already, well on the way to do that. So look, man, super proud of you. If anybody wants to hear more about you, where would I send them? Alloy Upstate or your clinic, or either or?
Yeah.
Give out some website info.
Yeah, sure. So, my personal Instagram is at Dr. Jolson, dr.jolson, Jolson. The clinic is at Upstate Spine. Our Alloy is at Alloy Upstate. You can also email me, DJ, my first 2 initials, at upstatess.com. That's my clinic email. Probably, now I have multiple emails, but that's probably the best way to catch me. But yeah, if anyone has questions, I would love to help. I mean, it's Alloy, and just I've just been lucky, man. It's been a fun ride. Yeah, I'm excited, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. I mean, it's been cool to see the growth and your mindset, and man, I'm just excited for what's to come.
Yeah, me too, dude. Honored to have you on the team. Dr. David Jolson, everybody. Appreciate you coming on, buddy. I know you're a busy man. We'll get you back on when we get some chance. I can't wait to see that beautiful space in person. But again, appreciate you guys. Hope you guys got a lot out of it. I certainly did. Guys are rock star. Reach out to them if you need anything, or you have questions about how this model works. But yeah, we'll catch you guys next week. Peace.